Hi there, Verena, Donna, and Kim. Thank you for joining me on the Well Vegan Travel Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
I'm really excited that we're recording this podcast because we've just come back from an incredible trip to Korea, all four of us, all together. So, this really is a different podcast than you might normally expect if you're a regular listener here. But before we talk about how we came to rather unexpectedly end up in Korea together, why don't each of you spend a moment just introducing yourselves and what you do in the vegan travel space? Verena?
Sure. Hi, I'm Verena. I'm living in New York, in Brooklyn to be exact, and I run vegan food tours in New York City. And I'm also planning on offering more international trips in the future, which were planned pre-COVID already, but then we all know what happened. So I'm working on expanding to the international market as well.
Thank you. Donna?
My name is Donna Zeigfinger. I'm the owner of Green Earth Travel. We have been a vegan run and owned travel agency since 1997, so we're in our 25th year. I've always wanted to learn about this area.
Hi, I'm Kim Giovacco, founder of Veg Johnson Journeys, based outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And I run vegan tours in the US and in Europe. And just realized that my tour to Iceland, which is starting on November 1st, will be my 25th tour since 2017.
Wow, congratulations, Kim. So, yes, all the four of us are in the vegan travel space, all working in sort of different niches, different areas. And I will say it was just so lovely to see you all. I've known Donna for many years, but we'd never met in person. Kim, I've known for many years, and we did meet one time in Paris. We crossed paths, and Verena, we've sort of chatted a little bit and worked on various little projects together. It was just so lovely to meet and spend a week with you. So I think the most interesting thing is why we all ended up in Korea in the first place. So Verena, would you like to talk a little bit about how it was that the four of us ended up in Korea?
Sure. So early this summer, I received a call, actually a call I did not pick up. So I thought it was some kind of spam. So I let it go to voicemail. And the message then said that I was invited to come to South Korea and I could bring other people who are also in the travel space along. And in addition to that, there was a food event in New York City for about 300 people, for which the Korean nun who was featured in Netflix was flown in. So all this was in one message, and I was really kind of worried and confused. I called back the caller. Her name is Patrice. She works at the Korean tourist office here in New York. And I'm like, this message sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? And she's like, no, there's no catch. We just want to, promote vegan tourism in South Korea. And we would like to invite you and show you what it has to offer. So she asked me for some recommendations of other people that are in this space. And you mentioned, Brady, we had all kind of known each other online, but I'd never met any one of you in person. So I gave her your contact details, and that was the beginning of our Korean venture, so to say.
Well, I'm very pleased I came to mind. Verena, really pleased. So, Donna, what did you think when you also got this call? Because I'm guessing Patrice took Verena's suggestions and she reached out to you. What did you think about all of this? Because you've been in the travel industry for a long time. This kind of thing doesn't happen very often, does it?
No, I've gone to fam trips, familiarization trips for those who don't know, and it's for the people in the tour industry, mostly travel agents that are set with tour operators to go to certain areas, to go check out hotels. Once in a while, I get onto familiarization trips that go to countries. But you usually have to pay a fee for it, like maybe the taxes or whatever it is. So I get this phone call like you did, Bridie, and I thought, what is this? When she said Verena, I'm like, okay, all right, it's good. It's fault that we're all here, I think, but I'm really glad I did. Still a little jet lag, as some of you are. I think Kim is the only one who's not, but I was excited to do it. It's an area that I've never focused in on before. I get people that want to go to Thailand and Singapore and Bali, but never really South Korea. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think we can overstate just how kind of rare something like this is to be invited on an all expenses paid trip where you're offered the opportunity to not just see a few hotels, but actually really be introduced to a country so well and so nicely, and to have it all vegan as well is something really rather special. Kim, you have a special kind of connection with the Korea office. It's just like this strange coincidence came to pass. Tell us
Yeah,
about
so
that.
for me, it's as if my career has absolutely come full circle. I was sitting in a vegan restaurant in Edinburgh, Scotland. Actually, it was the very first week of August, the last night of a tour there, and saw that I had a call from New York. And when I answered, it was Patrice, and we had briefly been in touch about 2 years ago, but she hadn't remembered that. And I actually held her position with the Korean Tourism Organization in New York 34 years ago. So at that time, I had only unfortunately worked for them for 2 years, and I had not visited Korea. So I was absolutely stunned by this invitation. I knew it was real because I knew that tourist offices extend invitations like this, but I could never have imagined how we would have been treated like royalty the whole week that we were there, and the things that we got to experience and the accommodations that they booked for us. It was really incredible.
It really was. And don't worry, listeners, we're going to get into all of that because it was really rather special. I'm very curious to know if any of you know anything else about this, because Patrice is actually vegan. So is this like her own sort of project or incentive? And like, why do you think they wanted to sort of market Korea as a vegan friendly destination, or basically getting to think about Korea as a vegan destination?
I'm not sure about that, but when I watched one of their webinars 2 years ago at the beginning of COVID, they were focusing on temple stays. So, as we know, or as our listeners will learn, the food at temple stays is always vegan. So, I guess just along the way, someone had the idea to promote that in conjunction with veganism.
Verena, you were the only person that actually had been to Korea before. Can you tell us a little bit about your last trip?
Yeah, it's almost exactly 10 years ago that my husband and I went on a trip to Japan and Korea. Back then, we had a friend who was working as a piano teacher in Seoul. So we went and visited him, and we really enjoyed our stay there. But thankfully, our itinerary was very different to the one we did this time. So back then, we spent a few days in Seoul, and then we went down to the island of Jeju and explored that for a little while. And years ago, I was still vegetarian only. And so I didn't face as many challenges as vegans might on a trip, even though in, East Asia, the use of dairy is usually very minuscule, especially in traditional cooking. But back then I was still eating eggs, obviously, so that made it a little bit easier. But yeah, I was really thrilled to go back to Korea and see how it has changed and see a different part of the country as well. And be with a group of vegans, so that is even better.
Yes, because there was the four of us, but there were also three sort of social media influencers, including probably the most well-known one is Rose from Cheap Lazy Vegan. And there were also some other non-vegan, I think, travel professionals that work in the non-vegan travel space, but they were on this vegan trip. And for all intensive purposes, this was a vegan trip. So the four of us actually came a couple of days early because we were invited to attend like a trade show Donna, you're a bit of a veteran of these kinds of trade shows. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was about?
It was a pretty elaborate but typical trade show. I've been to trade shows like this before, but not to the extent where they had singers and dancers of this caliber that they had. I don't remember how many vendors there were. There had to be at least 100 vendors there. I have done round tables before where you sit around and the vendor comes to you. But in this case, we had to make an appointment with each vendor to come see them. Now, the past 3 years, when I've been to webinars and the trade show webinars, I've made appointments to go to the vendors, but I've never done it in person. So it's a combination of both. And it was really interesting to meet all the different vendors to see how they would match up with, the travel needs that we have.
And what did you find was their reaction to you when you said, well, book mainly vegan clients, and how could you accommodate them? What was their reaction to that? But it's important to know that the trade show was different to the vegan trip. This was just like a big sort of, not a hodgepodge, but a cross section of the entire tourism industry in Korea. So what was their reaction when you told them that you were booking vegan clients?
Well, some of them were confused, but they would say, we can do this. They would always say, we can do this. Never said no, but they seemed a little confused. I don't know if you ladies had the same reactions, but that's, what I got. I also was going because my husband is a potter. I know this is off topic, and he's wanting to do a pottery tour to Korea. And there was only one company that actually knew how to do a pottery tour to South Korea, because he does it with a gentleman in the States. So I think there's going to be a learning curve with these tour operators, but I think they're willing to learn. There was one tour operator in particular that does know about vegan travel, and that's the tour operator that we were on. I unfortunately didn't meet her at the trade show.
Yeah, she came and popped in throughout the trip, didn't she? She came in and checked up on us. Did anyone want to add anything there?
I'll just say that I met 3 or 4 really great potential partners to work with on organizing a tour. I think it will be difficult for me to decide which one to actually work with.
Yeah, I found that when I talked with people, that at the start of the conversation, they looked really, really sort of confused, like you said, Donna. But as you talked a little bit more and more, like these sort of like pennies started to drop, and they're like, oh, okay, well, you could do that, and you could do that, and you could do that. And I could actually see that they were starting to get, a little bit excited about potentially doing something a little bit different. So that was really, really nice to see as well. Yay.
One last thing, there was a restaurant there that was vegan. And then there was the Buddhist temple. I can't remember. You guys might be able to, refresh my memory, that talked about plant-based food. So there were 2 vendors there that did know what they were talking about. Absolutely. And I will be in touch with them in the future.
After that, we then started the familiarization trip, and that was when we met the social media influencers that I referred to earlier, and also those travel professionals. But we also were accompanied by Michelle, who was the tour guide for the group, and she was just absolutely lovely. And she was kind of like showing us around to each place, like organizing all of the logistics. So that was really, really nice. It wasn't like they just said, here you are, off you go. No, we were totally looked after the whole time, and she was just absolutely wonderful. So what did you know about Korea before going on the trip?
Actually, I didn't. It was something totally new to me. I could talk to you about Thailand. I could talk to you a little bit about Japan, but South Korea, I knew very little about, because I haven't really sent people there, which is about to change.
It's the same for me. Like, I've lived in Asia for a long time, so I'm familiar with the sort of the broad strokes that you can make about Asia. And I've had lots of Korean students in the past, but I never really knew much about Korea as a destination. This was all really new to me. Verena, of course, you went there before, so you knew a little bit. And Kim, maybe through your job? that job that you had a long time ago? But
Yes, I knew the main tourist areas. One thing I didn't realize was how mountainous it was, pretty much throughout the whole country, even in Seoul. I had vaguely familiar with K-pop and the dramas, but I had no idea how significant that all was. In fact, they kind of have an overarching term for it called K-wave. Until we got there and saw all the influences. So I think that's another thing that tourists could very much be interested in.
So we're going to get into the details, but overall, would you say that Korea is a vegan friendly destination, Verena?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why would you say that?
There are a lot of vegan restaurants in cities. So if you use an app such as Happy Cow, you will find plenty of options, especially for lunch and dinner. Breakfast is a little bit more difficult. Even finding plant-based milk, for example, has shown to be a little bit of a challenge at times. So even though we wanted to support local coffee shops, of which there are thousands, like there's so many coffee shops in this country, we often ended up going to Starbucks because that was really the only place that had a reliable source of plant-based milk. So that I think is something that people have to be a little bit aware of. It can change very quickly, as we've seen in the US and in other countries. So if there's a push towards plant-based milks, I think it will change very quickly. But as of now, that is, I think, the biggest thing that people have to keep in mind. And another thing we've noticed is that a lot of the restaurants we went to were not on the ground floor, but like on the second or even third floor. So if you just wander the streets of Seoul, for example, you might walk past a really, really good vegan restaurant because it's just not visible from the street level. So if you do your research, or of course, if you join a tour, then I think it's pretty easy. Yeah.
And Kim, what would you say about the breakfast? Because we stayed in lots of very nice hotels. They often do in Asia, just this huge, big, massive buffet. What would you say about that? Because I was a little bit frustrated with the breakfast, I will say. What did you think about it? What could vegans expect in these places?
Yeah, I had never seen breakfast buffets like that anywhere. And it really was a shame because I'm sure those breakfasts were very expensive, that we were probably only able to eat maximum 5% of the items that were on there. And we just saw milk in, even there could be 12 types of bread and there'd be only one baguette that didn't have milk in it, or a lot of prepared salads that looked very interesting, but they usually had milk in the dressing. So at first, there was absolutely no protein in the breakfast. The very first hotel we stayed at, we were lucky. They had a homemade vegan yogurt, which was absolutely delicious. But we never saw that again at another hotel. So I felt like I was kind of overeating in the morning because it was just like, oh, there's no protein. So I'm going to have 2 bowls of this yogurt or have a few of these rolls. And then I think we just kind of got used to it. And then once we made our needs a bit known, we were given special tofu dishes that were made just for us, some tofu and vegetables. And I thought that those were really nice. And I think if, in the future with advanced planning, it wouldn't be a problem.
I would agree. I mean, our lunches and dinners were absolutely spectacular, even when we were in non-vegan places. But the breakfast, I don't think the tour company had done much to prep the hotels about that, which is, absolutely fine. That's why we were there and doing this work, if you can call it that. That's something really helpful for us to know if we decide to plan on our own vegan tours. Donna, what do you think it's like it traveling as a vegan and, going to non-vegan restaurants? What's your feeling about that? Do you think it's even possible?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely possible. One thing I wanted to bring up about the breakfast is if you are a sugary person, but I'm not a savory breakfast person. Let's put it that way. So if you're not a savory breakfast person in the mornings, you could do what I did and have cereal with orange juice and that soy milk. That's one of the things I did, or you can have fruit. So I've never really had much of an issue in any restaurants. Well, I shouldn't say that. There have been some restaurants I've had issues with, but it seemed like they were always willing to accommodate us in the restaurants wherever we went. So when we had lunches, well, most of the lunches were vegan anyway. They were either the temple food or we went to a vegan restaurant. Same thing with the dinners. And I don't think I've ever eaten so much. I think there was one day where we had two 10-course meals, which isn't going to be typical. That's not going to be typical for the average traveler, just so you guys know. I thought I was going to lose weight on this trip, but I didn't. So I found that the vegan food was fabulous when they served
Yeah,
it.
I definitely think Michelle did an amazing job, like working with the non-vegan restaurants. But I'm just sort of thinking more about like independent travelers. It's my observation based on my little bit of time there that if you were an independent traveler and you were just walking down a street and you saw a restaurant, it might be quite hard to accommodate your vegan needs and requests. Certainly, there probably isn't a marked vegan option. You would probably have to try to get them to make something, expect a few communication issues and maybe a few little mistakes and maybe some frustration on both sides. I personally think that eating vegan in a non-vegan restaurant would be a bit of work for us and for the restaurant. Would you all agree with that?
Yes. If you look on Happy Cow, there are quite a few vegan restaurants in Seoul, but it also is an enormous city. So you have to keep that in perspective. It might not be able to be easy to reach them all the time.
Yeah, and I might add also that some seemingly vegan dishes, by looking at them, might not be vegan in the end. Like what we were touching on with breakfast, something looked vegan, but then it wasn't because it had milk in it. If you go to a traditional Korean restaurant, a lot of the dishes might have fish in them. For example, traditional Korean kimchi almost always has fish in it in some way or another, either it's shrimp or anchovies or just fish sauce. Same goes for the little banchan, which is the little side dishes you get served with almost every meal. They might not be vegan, even though they look like just pickled or fermented vegetables. They might not necessarily be 100% vegan. To what Donna was saying, I think there's options you can find in traditional Korean restaurants that are not vegan restaurants. Like you could get like japchae, which is a noodle dish, like a sweet potato noodle dish that often has meat in it, but you could hopefully communicate somehow that you would like to have that without meat. Or just a bibimbap, which often has egg on it or almost always has egg on it. Again, if you leave off the egg, then it would be a vegan-friendly dish as well.
Okay, so going to Korea as a vegan is partly about food, but that's not the only reason we go to a place just to eat food. There's so many other reasons we go to a place. And we went to 4 different cities, Gyeongju and Busan and Seoul and Gyeongju. So I thought it would be quite nice if each of us did a little bit of an explanation about each place and where it is and what it was that we enjoyed there. We did do a little bit in Seoul, but we'll do Seoul perhaps at the end. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about the first stop that we went to in Yeosu?
Yeah, so Yeosu is a city in the southwest of Korea, and it took us about 5 hours to drive there. And I might add that we had an absolutely amazing bus and a really, really good driver. Our bus was like a business class seat on an airplane, really, really nice. And when we got to the city, we had some free time to walk around the port area, which has a lot of food vendors. This place, did not look like it would be vegan friendly at all, unfortunately. But still, if you're a traveler, you still enjoy, at least if you're a traveler like me, I still enjoy looking around and, getting the vibe of a place. That was a really cute setting by the water. So there's a little gondola that connected the two sides of the city, so to say. And we also visited an immersive experience museum, which is, for some of you might have seen these experiences where you have like the Van Gogh or the Klimt Hall de Lumières kind of experiences where you walk in and then the whole room turns into an ocean. So in this case, for example, we had a more like nature themed experience. So there was oceans, there was forests, there was safari. And at the end, there was also art. So it was a little bit of everything. And it was a very cool experience and really nicely done. And I would recommend doing that for sure. It's a little bit out of the way. And unfortunately, we did not see enough of the city of Yeosu to really say whether it is worth going there or not, I would say, for the amount of time it takes to get there.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Halong City on Halong Bay in Vietnam. So for people who've not been there before, Halong City is like the jumping off point for going to Halong Bay, which are these beautiful limestone casts coming out of the water. And whilst the view from the hotel didn't have this exactly this view with these limestone casts, the coastline really is beautiful. And there's all along there, it's an incredibly sort of jagged coastline filled with like beaches and bays and these hundreds, thousands maybe of islands throughout that whole bay. So I imagine that they offer boat trips and things like that as well. Just outside of there, we actually went to a wetland, didn't we? Would you be able to talk about that as well, Verena?
Yeah, so I honestly forgot the name of that, but it's a UNESCO protected wetlands area. And we were able to walk up an observation deck, which was about like 45 minutes of a very quick walk because we were a little bit short of time. And from there, you had a really nice view of the wetlands area, which then turned into the ocean. So it's like an estuary. Some of us saw some bird life there and some turtles and some crabs. And it seems to be a very popular spot for Koreans to go to. In general, they are very fond of hiking. So you see a lot of people in their hiking gear. Even though this particular area was all like a wooden path for the most part, they are still dressed in their like, expedition gear almost. And we were just our everyday clothes, basically. That was also a very, very nice experience. Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly did pack in a huge amount into this week. And I think normally travelers probably would, even on a tour, wouldn't see and do as much as we did in a week. I'm sure that the Korean Tourism Organization just wanted to get their money's worth with us and just showcase as much of Korea as they possibly could. So that's why we didn't have a lot of time in all of these places. It was just like a little taste of it. Yeah, I really enjoyed that wetland as well. So Kim, after Yeosu, we went into Busan, which I think was kind of a highlight for many of us. Can you talk a little bit about Busan?
Sure. I just wanted, though, to add to the last stop. We didn't get to go there, but very close to the wetlands was also apparently like the National Botanical Garden of Korea. So that's something that would be very worthwhile to see as well. So Busan is Korea's second largest city, and it's a port city and very modern like Seoul. We were so fortunate to take a ride on a private catamaran just before sunset. So that would have been on the East China Sea, and we were able to see all these really modern skyscrapers and bridges around us. Then we did something very different the next day, which was to go to a place called Gamcheon Cultural Village. And I had never seen anything like this. These were houses that were built on the side of a steep hill in the 1920s and 1930s, I think to provide housing for workers not too far away from the port. I guess they fell into disrepair over the years, and then in 2009, they did an art themed renovation. So the houses are painted in very bright colors, and there are lots of twisting alleyways. And they actually get, I read, 1.5 million tourists there a year. Some of the residents weren't too happy about that, and a couple hundred families, I guess, left. There were some empty houses which have now been turned into cafes and a couple of museums about the neighborhood. I say neighborhood, but it's actually quite big. I mean, there's hundreds of houses and lots of stairs, and the way they were built is that no house blocks the view of another house. There's also some shops. I had never seen anything like it, and I really enjoyed visiting there.
Yeah.
There was a lot of artisans there. We came across a woodworker there, you and I, and we also got lost there, which was kind of fun because you can get lost there. It's a maze. It was pretty amazing. I really enjoyed
Me
that.
too. I really enjoyed the street art that was kind of everywhere as well. And it was really, really busy when we went there because the night before, BTS had just done a big concert in Busan, in that same city. I did not know about this, but BTS, they are now approaching 30, and they'd had their mandatory military service postponed from, I don't know, 22, whatever it normally is, until they were 30 because of their global success. And they were doing this concert as sort of like a thank you and a sort of a temporary farewell, I think, before they start their military service. And also, I think Busan was doing this as well because it's trying to get the World Expo at some point in the future. So yes, it was full of young people. Some of the members of BTS are from Busan originally, I believe.
And I found it really interesting. The artwork, there's a couple of buildings with different things with lines, but they had the BTS boys on the side of the building, and there was a line that had to be like a couple blocks long for the first one. I was like, what? I thought some celebrity was there, and it wasn't. They were just trying to get a photograph of them next to the artwork.
Yeah, I noticed that throughout Korea, like creating opportunities to have photos or selfies or to get nice photos taken is just everywhere in Korea. After we spent one night only in Busan, and then we went to Gyeongju, and I did not know anything about this place. I think it was about a 1 hour or 90-minute drive north of Busan. So we got up quite early because there is literally so much to see in Gyeongju. I didn't know anything about this place before I went there. I think I touched on it a little bit in this sort of like travel agents familiarization course that Donna and I know we did before the trip, just to get a little bit of familiarity. It's really basically like a historic complex. There's lots and lots of sites scattered throughout the whole town of places to go. So it's really, I would say, is where you get your big sort of hit of history in Korea. It's like the one place that you can go where you're going to see a lot in a very small area. There is so much. I wrote down the names because I don't think I would remember them all, but there's the Donggung Palace, which is beautiful to see at nighttime. Like they light all of it up. They've got a lot of ponds that all light up and you've got the reflections there. Another place was this astronomical observatory that we were a little bit confused about, but this is really old tower which they use to tell time or to check the position of the stars. I think I'm certainly still a little bit confused about that. But also lots of like beautiful temples from the Shilla period, which is like between the 7th and the 9th century. And also the burial mounds. So these important people were buried at the center of these really big mounds. A couple of these had been excavated. You could actually go inside and see what was going on inside these mounds. Some of them had not yet been excavated. We also had the opportunity to go and visit a museum where we got to see many of the relics, the artifacts that had been recovered from these excavations as well. It really was quite a surprising day. Does anyone want to add to what I said about Gyeongju?
Unfortunately, that's where my phone was dying. Brought it with me, but it was down to like 8%. And it was the one place that we saw that had so much pottery. I had to take all these photos, and luckily one of the people in the group had a battery pack for me so I could start taking all these photos. You have to be careful though, because some of the parts of the museum do not allow you to take photos. So just be really careful with that. But that was like a kid in a candy store for me.
Yeah, if you like pottery, Korea's a place to go, and this place specifically. Verena, do you want to add anything about this place?
Yeah, just a little thing that you mentioned with that astronomical clock. Right next to it, there were beautiful flower fields. And then there was a plant called a pink muley, which is like a grass, very thin grass. And it was just moving in a very beautiful and appealing way in the wind. It again was a very popular photo stop for Koreans and for us too. And yeah, just a very nice town to walk around in and to get a lot of different experiences, I would say.
I will say that I was really surprised as to how many flowers there were, considering it was October. And I didn't realize this, that October is one of the peak times to go to Korea because it's not so hot and the colors of the changing leaves. I mean, I didn't experience it. It's not like the East Coast or the east of Canada or the United States, but it was still beautiful. And the weather was just amazing. Maybe we weren't lucky. Maybe that's just how it is, but it felt like we were really lucky. It was just gorgeous, really nice and fresh in the mornings, warm during the day. It was really magical. Kim, do you want to add anything to Gyeongju?
I just wanted to say that the changing of the leaves around the temples were really beautiful. And one thing that you noticed, Bridie, was that Korea was very forested compared to other places in Asia. Then our guide confirmed that it's actually the third most forested country in the world.
Yeah, it was jaw-dropping. I just couldn't believe when we were driving through the countryside just how many forests and trees there were. It was really lovely. All right, now let's get into Seoul. Maybe we can all talk a little bit about Seoul because this was where we focused most of our time, I would say, and we certainly got to see many places. Donna, do you want to talk about maybe a couple of places that you experienced in Seoul?
Well, the first and the main one for me was seeing the palace. As you guys know, we walked in there and I started crying. So travel makes me cry sometimes because I'm so inspired by it. And it was just so beautiful to see the changing of the guard. It was just amazing. The timing on that was just amazing. The main thing for me was the palace.
Can you describe it a little bit, like what people can expect there, what it's like?
It's hard to explain without seeing photos of it, but I felt like I was in a movie set. It was just like a cinematic movie set, not just any movie set. It was just so vast and so beautiful and so colorful. And to see all these young women in their outfits just really was amazing. And the artifacts were just breathtaking for me.
Yeah, I think that was your first sort of exposure to some spectacular Asian palace, wasn't it, Donna?
It was. I mean, yeah, I've been to castles many times, but I've never been to an Asian palace. And it just felt like I was in some kind of movie set. And to me, it was beautiful. It was just absolutely breathtaking and gorgeous. Children were just beautiful in their outfit. There was a little boy that I followed around, and he was so cute in his little outfit.
It seems like Koreans, they don't walk around in everyday life in their hanbok, the traditional Korean costume, but they do seem to wear it whenever there's an opportunity, was my observation, whether that's accurate or not. Kim,
You know,
can you share a few of the places that we enjoyed in
Oh,
Seoul?
going back to that palace, I just couldn't believe how big and vast it was. It was just one courtyard after another. And that's actually just one of four palaces that are in Seoul. I feel like there was actually a lot we didn't get to see in Seoul because our guide let us know that there are 72 museums there. And we actually didn't visit any museums, but it seems like there are a lot that are very high tech or design focused. And I think those would be really interesting because there are things that you might not be able to find in other cities. There is a lot of traffic there, some of the worst traffic I've ever seen. So I think if someone were going there, they should plan very carefully the area that they're going to stay in. There is a subway system there, and I think it's probably very amazing and efficient, but unfortunately, we didn't get to ride it at all. I'm a huge public transportation fan, so I was a little sad that we didn't have any free time to experience that. But I think that would be a really good way to avoid the traffic. There seemed to be a really good bus system as well. There were buses everywhere. Lots of wide sidewalks in parts of the city. So it looked like it would be great for walking around. At one point, we saw something similar to the High Line in New York, which is an abandoned railroad line, elevated, that's been turned into a park. In Seoul, they did that from a highway that was cutting through the city that they're not using anymore. We saw the train station was very high tech. It looked like an airport in the US. Just loved in the whole country the mixture of modern and traditional.
I agree. Yeah, Donna and I, we went for a walk along that High Line equivalent, but I don't know whether you got to see it, Kim, but it's actually a stream. A stream runs through it as well. So
Wow.
you've got the water and these beautiful parklands as well that you can walk along and run along. It's really lovely. Verena, would you like to share a couple of Seoul experiences?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Bukchon traditional village or Hanok village in Seoul, which Hanok is like a traditional Korean house with these really cute roofs and very low houses. And I'm just a big fan of this architecture, so I thought that was really cute. You can walk through this neighborhood, which people still live in, so you have to be a little bit quiet. There's watch guards around that will tell you to keep your voice low. But it's just going back in time a little bit, kind of what Kim was saying. There's always a little bit of modern and then there's a little bit of traditional architecture in Seoul. And I think that's a very nice mix. I would like to add that certain apps, like Google Maps, for example, will not really work in South Korea. So Google Maps does work for public transportation, but it does not give you any other directions. So it will not work for walking directions, for example. There are some Korean apps you can download called Naver, for example, or Kakao. So you will basically be stuck. If you're used to relying on Google Maps, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult there.
Yeah, that really confused me at first. When I was there a couple of days earlier and I was able to go and see my students in a different part of the city. And I was so confused about why I couldn't get walking directions. And then the penny finally dropped. You didn't share this one because maybe it wasn't a highlight for you, but I really enjoyed it. And I certainly think we had a lot of laughs. But we went to this little area in Seoul. This woman who is like a designer, she was invited by the Korean tourism organization to come down and sort of show us some aspects of Korean culture. For example, like the tea ceremonies. Just like Japan, Korea has its own sort of tea making ceremonies with very particular rules and practices on how tea is made. And it is a bit of an art form, and we all tried, and I don't think we did a very good job. It was lots of laughs. Also, we learned a little bit about how to sort of gift wrap things made out of scarves and wrappings as well. That was really nice. And we all got to learn a little bit about the hanbok, the traditional Korean clothes, and how that is worn, and also try it on as well. That was kind of cute and nice and fun, and had some pictures taken. That was kind of a fun morning, and I think brought the group together a little bit early on in the trip. Do you want to add to that?
Yes, the wig that I wore, because I took on the queen mom, as we call it, must have weighed at least 8 pounds on my head. And it was very heavy. And I'm trying to figure out how these women did that back then. They must have had very strong necks.
That was really, really cool. Verena, would you like to talk about the temple visit? Because even though that wasn't like super downtown Seoul, it was like a sort of a morning excursion that we did from Seoul. So tell us a little bit about those temple stays and how that all works.
Sure. So there are, I think, roughly 100 temples in Korea that you can overnight stay. We got the opportunity to spend a few hours with a nun at Jinkwansa Temple. She gave us a really, really nice experience on showing us what life in a temple is like and what the Buddhist approach to life is for her and for their community. And it's a very beautiful temple. Most of it has unfortunately been rebuilt because it was destroyed in a fire. We first got a little tour of the grounds. We saw one of the accommodations where you would stay if you end up staying at a temple overnight. So you would basically be sleeping on the floor on a padded bed. And it is very simple, but still looks very comfortable. Then she took us on a guided meditation walk. So we took a walk through the temple grounds and through the woods that are close to the temple, and became one with nature and concentrated on the way we walk and kind of let our thoughts drift away a little bit. After that, we entered a very modern temple, and there we continued our meditation in a seated way. And then we had my favorite lunch of the trip there at the temple, which was, I think they brought out maybe 30 different dishes. And it was just very colorful and very, very tasty. And some of us were interviewed there, like Bridie and Rose. They were interviewed by a Korean newspaper because we did create some media buzz while we were there. And after our lunch, we also still had a small tea ceremony and dessert also at that temple. And I think that was the favorite of a lot of our group members, was that temple visit, because it was just so, so different to what we are used to in the Western world.
I would agree. I've visited a lot of temples and done a lot of sort of little retreats and meditation retreats over the years. And this was unlike anything that I've been to. It was really rather special and unique. Donna, Kim, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I wish we could have spent the whole day there. I was so happy with the nun who guided us around. She just radiated positivity, but she was very approachable and friendly and funny. And it was just an absolutely wonderful experience. Definitely the highlight of the trip for me.
I would have liked to have stayed overnight there, even though it was on the floor. It was just so calming there, and I think we all needed it.
Yeah. Our itinerary went through a few different variations before the final one, and a temple stay was put out there as a possibility, but for whatever reason, I actually don't know, it didn't come to pass. But yeah, I would definitely like to experience that, because it's basic but incredibly clean and very comfortable and nice and very accessible. I think Jill Biden actually did stay at this temple a few years back, and I'm sure she wouldn't stay anywhere that wasn't, pretty nice. So yeah, it's a really great experience to visit one of these places, to stay in one of these places, to eat at one of these places. It was just incredible. Kim, you touched on this a little bit about the metro lines throughout Seoul and the public transportation. So I did use the subway in Seoul, and it was extremely comprehensive, incredibly clean. It felt really, really safe. It's huge. So I was often on the subway for like an hour at a time, getting from place to place. It's really good. There was excellent buses. But what about outside of the big cities? I certainly noticed inside the towns that there were incredible bus systems as well. But what about getting from place to place? Donna, would you like to talk about the bullet trains perhaps that we took?
Well, first off, you have to be very quiet there. I was listening to my voice message because you can get Wi-Fi on there, and a woman came by and said, nope, nope. So anyway, it was very clean. It was beautiful. The sights were beautiful along the way. I like that it was so quiet because you go on these trains and everyone's talking. So it was nice to just not speak, and just have quiet there. And it was, as I said, it was a clean train, which is unusual these days.
Verena?
And it's also super fast. So if you've been on trains in Japan, it's a similar experience like the Shinkansen. I think it's like 280 kilometers per hour or something. That's its speed. We saw one train pass. They have like a middle track that's not accessible from the platform you're staying at for safety reasons, I assume. So we saw a train that passed our station, and as soon as it got in, like it was just already gone again. It was like phew, a really, really fast train. Very comfortable, and I checked the prices. It's not super cheap, but it's affordable. I think that the ride from like Busan to Seoul is about $80 or something like that, and it takes around 2 hours. It's a very good option to take the train around Korea.
We're in first class, which was really nice, but I did check the price of the economy tickets, and it was about $50. So I thought that that was very reasonable. I was so happy that we were given the chance to ride it. It was pretty funny. Our bus actually went back to Seoul empty of passengers. It only had our luggage, just so that we were able to be given the opportunity to try the bullet train. So I thought that was really special.
I just absolutely love trains as well. They're just such a great way to get from A to B, and really reasonably priced, extremely clean, extremely comfortable. Something that we can add perhaps that there is connectivity everywhere. Maybe a few years ago, maybe it still does, but it had the best Wi-Fi and connectivity network and download speeds of like the whole world, and maybe some other countries have caught up. I don't know. But there is Wi-Fi and internet absolutely everywhere. I noticed a few places where you would go to cross the road, and you would have the pedestrian crossings, and there would be the green light and the red light to know when to cross. But there was also like this light actually at the curb as well that was also lit up. And at first I thought that was for people that were visually impaired. Maybe having something on the ground would help them better than having this light up where they might not know where to look necessarily. But apparently it's for people looking on their phones all of the time so that they know when to cross. I don't know much about this, not having any physical impairments like this, but I noticed there was a lot of that bumpy paving for people with sticks so that they can find their way around places. I noticed a lot of people in wheelchairs whizzing around the place, which tells me that it's possible to do so. And often at attractions and airports and places, even rest stops that we stopped at, there were these little sort of sections with cupboards where they had like a selection of wheelchairs and crutches for people to use as well. Like you just picked it out and then you used it and then you dropped it off when you were done, and then you would get back into your car again. I mean, it was just really amazing that they were thinking of all of these things. One other thing that I noticed that was really cool was that the fire exit signs, as well as being on the wall, they were actually embedded into the ground and lit up. So in the case of a fire, you could actually see these on the ground. I thought that was really, really cool as well. And lots of cool safety features in the case of fire, way more than there is here in Canada anyway.
Right. Like you noticed early on, Brady, in the hotel rooms that there were torches or flashlights and smoke hoods, and I have never seen that anywhere else.
Yeah, really cool. They even had, like, on the third floor of my airport hotel, like an escape ladder so that you could get out of the hotel window. It was just in this little box. I mean, I'm sure it would be terrifying if you ever had to use it. Yeah, they seem very, very safety conscious, generally speaking. Yeah, so transportation infrastructure, absolutely incredible. Let's talk about food. We had so many, so let's all just share one of our favorite meals. Verena, you talked a little bit about yours already, but maybe you want to talk a little bit more about your favorite meal.
Yeah, so my favorite meal was the temple food at Jinkwanza Temple. And generally, temple food, aside from the fact that it is vegan, does not use any alliums. So no onions, no garlic, no scallions, which in Western cooking is like the base of every meal that you make. You first saute onions, and you would think it might taste bland without those flavors, but it's just very, very tasty. We ate some very unique dishes. For example, perilla leaves is something that is used quite frequently in Korean cooking. It's related to a shiso, if you've ever had that. So it's a pretty big leaf that can then either be stuffed with something and rolled up, or it gets deep fried. And it has a minty taste, very, very delicious. And then we ate bracken ferns, which is something you hardly ever see on menus here. Have a very earthy taste to them. And a lot of tofu dishes were also served in the temple. And like it was a feast of like 30 different dishes, and we were seated on a not very traditional Korean table with a lazy Susan in the middle. There were, I think, 6 of us on each table, and each and every one of us had a different favorite. So there was a little bit of everything, and some of it was more spicy, some was less spicy. So different variations of foods, and I think everybody left very happy at that meal.
My favorite was Forest Kitchen, which was located in a big shopping mall. For those people that don't know, in Asia, there are a lot of really nice places, restaurants and cafes are actually located in shopping malls. And that was the case with Forest Kitchen. And I would say that was probably, 10 or 12 courses. And it was very much sort of like a high-end, fancy dining experience. It had like an open kitchen so we could see the staff preparing food. It was a completely vegan restaurant, and maybe they just wanted to wow us right off the back. But we had the tasting menu, and the first thing that we got was this kind of little platter, I guess, that was all divided up with a few different kinds of small bites, and it was served with dry ice. So it came onto our table with this dry ice vapor coming off of it. The whole meal was possibly one of the best dining experiences I have ever had in my entire life, in terms of the uniqueness, the quality, the way it was served, the aesthetic of it. It was just absolutely incredible. That was hands down my favorite meal, for sure. Donna, what about your favorite meal?
I was going to say all of them,
You gotta choose one.
because I was waiting for Kim because just one. I mean, I have to say the forest was as well. And it was just spectacular. The presentation was amazing. It wasn't, traditional Korean food, but it was very well put together and very tasty. But I was also surprised about the temple food because I was expecting bland food. And it wasn't at all. It was there was some kick in some of those dishes that we had. So yes, All of them.
Yeah, Far's Kitchen was my favorite too. But just in order to talk about something different, at the end of the trip, we went to a very Western style place called Plant. And I was happy to go there because number one, we have a high-end place in Asheville that's called Plant. Very different though. As much as I enjoyed all of the Korean food, it was nice to see just standards like burgers and Philly cheesesteak and noodle bowls after a week of not seeing them, and real Western desserts, which wasn't, I guess in Korea, mostly they're eating fruit for dessert or very sweet things that might be made with red beans and sugar. But here we were able to have real layer cakes like we see at home, although there was a nice twist. The one that I had was actually a black sesame cake, and it was a gray color with the frosting, but it was very delicious. And yeah, they had chocolate chip cookies there and peanut butter cookies. So I liked the atmosphere. It was nice to see other Westerners there. It was nice to see young Koreans there. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
It was really busy there. I was surprised how busy it was.
It was really busy. And
Pleasantly.
something that I really appreciated about that particular place was that we got to try, I think it was called uni meat. So we had the opportunity to try Korea's equivalent to Beyond Meat, Impossible Meat, stuff like that. For those people that don't know, Asia is actually doing a lot of food tech at the moment, just like we are here, and they're producing their own products. So we got to try Unimeat, which is the Korean version, and it was really, really tasty. And I had this huge Philly cheesesteak sandwich there. It was absolutely epic and delicious and amazing. It was really tasty. The food that we experienced was just generally awesome. All right, so let's move on to personal highlights. If you were to say your favorite moment thing about our trip to Korea, Kim, what would you say?
Definitely the temple. And I think it would be really interesting to see the different temples throughout the country, but the one that we went to was very close to Seoul, so it was definitely convenient. They have various programs there that you could do, so you could learn how to meditate, and they have things that involve ringing the huge bells, or you can make beaded bracelets, and yeah, just all kinds of things. I guess these programs change daily or weekly, so you could honestly focus a whole trip on temple stays, and I think they're pretty reasonable to stay at, maybe $30 a night or $50, including breakfast and dinner.
Verena, what about you?
For me, the highlight was definitely the food. I'm just a huge foodie since I do, vegan food walking tours. I just love the variety of the food that we got. It was amazing.
Donna?
It was a little bit of everything because it's not an area I've been to before, but the palace, I have to say, was still my favorite. It was still very emotional for me to see.
I really, really like the skywalk. I didn't talk about that yet, but for me, this was kind of pushing myself out of my comfort zone. For those people that don't know, Seoul has these two sort of towers that are linked at the top by a walkway, and I think they're like more than 500 meters high. We all had the opportunity, but I think I was the only one out of the four of us that actually did it. You get changed into all of this kind of safety gear. It's very safety conscious. And you had the opportunity to walk between the two. Now, you're not actually looking down to the ground, so it doesn't feel like you're that high, but you certainly do you're outside and exposed to the elements, so to speak, and you get to see the most incredible views of this enormous city. That was a bit of a personal highlight, pushing myself out of my comfort zone a little bit. But yeah, there were lots of amazing things that happened on this trip.
Can I add to that, Bridie? Because it's the 5th tallest building in the world. So, and I have a fear of heights. I was actually impressed that Kim went out onto the glass floor because I couldn't even do that. I have a picture of her out on there looking down. I'm like, okay. Anyway, it is the fifth tallest building in
To
the
me,
world.
that was a little bit more disorientating than the actual skywalk, because I think I knew on the skywalk I was attached in, whereas on the glass thing, you were just standing there. For me, that felt a little bit more scary, surprisingly. All right. So, what surprised you about Korea, about this trip? Donna, tell us.
It was never on my to-go list, and this has happened to me before. It was never an area that I had an interest in for whatever reason, and I loved it, and I want to go back.
Verena?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Donna. I was very much looking forward to going back since it's been 10 years, and I liked it much more than I did the first time, to be honest. So I'm also looking forward to going back and seeing more of the country.
Kim?
The level of hospitality that we experienced everywhere was just fantastic, and so many different experiences. And when we look at all the brochures that we got at the travel fair, there are some really, really interesting and beautiful places to see throughout the country. So I think it's a very underrated destination.
I would agree. The big surprise to me was how much I loved it. Just like many of you said, it wasn't really high on my to go list. And I really had such an incredible time. I feel like I understand a little bit more about Korea now. And it really is such an incredible destination to go visit. And I really want listeners who are listening to this to really consider Korea as a destination to go to, because it's so cool. It's full of history. Its culture is very, very interesting. As Kim said, the hospitality that you experience, and it wasn't just because we were being hosted by the Korean tourism organization and they were trying to wow us as well. Like, I went to visit some Korean students that I have taught in the past, and I saw them in person. I taught them previously online, and I was just blown away by the hospitality that I received there. So I just think that they're just very hospitable people and willing to make you feel very comfortable and very welcome. So, as travel professionals, I'm sure the Korean Tourism Organization is going to want you to do something with this experience that you've had in terms of maybe sharing your knowledge of Korea with your clients, with your travelers. So, what are you going to do, Verena? What's your plans?
I would like to offer a combination of Korea and Taiwan with maybe an optional add-on of Palau, which is a great destination for scuba diving. I feel like if you're flying that far, it's around 15 hours from the East Coast, I think it would be a shame to cover only one place. It would be nice to put together 2 countries or even 3. And kind of do like building blocks so people can choose, I want to do this one only or want to add another one, so that it gives travelers more flexibility. My main goal would be Korea and Taiwan together.
Fantastic. Kim, what are you going to do?
I like to focus on just one country per tour. So I would have minimum 10 days there. It would mostly be in Seoul, but then to 1 or 2 other places. And in Seoul, my tour would definitely be focused on using public transportation, as almost all of my tours do. The hard part is going to be narrowing down of all the different sites and activities.
One thing I've always liked doing, and I haven't done it in years, and I would like to start up, is to have a tour combined with volunteerism. One of the things is to bring some dogs back. We won't go into detail about the dog festival. So I would like to do a cultural tour and then maybe do a couple days of volunteering and getting some of these dogs out and bringing them back to the U.S.
Yeah, it's like a flight volunteer, isn't it? When you can sign up
Yes.
to accompany a dog back to a place where there is a forever home waiting for them, because in case listeners don't know, it's much cheaper to send a dog as accompanied baggage. I don't really like using that word to describe a dog, but that's what they call it, rather than unaccompanied baggage. So that makes it a lot cheaper. So yeah, that's definitely something that visitors to Korea can check out. For me, I think the first natural logical step for World Vegan Travel is to possibly add on like a 5 or a 6 day trip to Korea on top of our Japan trips that we're planning to do in 2024. So you wouldn't have to do it this way, but people who are going to Japan might like to consider an add-on, or they could just do it by themselves, of a trip to Korea, because they are quite close to each other. So you could do a 7 or 8 or however many days it ends up being trip to Japan, and then also do Korea as well, because there are really great flight connections between the two countries. There are some similarities but also tons and tons of differences as well. So that is what I'm really excited about. Now, we have talked a long time already, but I did want for our guests to share like one quick tip or recommendation for travel to Korea before we say goodbye. So, Verena, what's your top tip or recommendation?
Don't leave the country without going to a dodgy karaoke bar.
Right.
For a coffee fiend like myself, be prepared to start drinking coffee black, maybe, because there's no guarantee that you'll be able to find soy milk or oat milk, unfortunately. I am a coffee fiend, but I made it through the 9 days.
Donna?
I have a couple. So if you're a sweet breakfast person, don't expect it unless you go to one of these high-end places that will have soy milk and you can have cereal. So expect savory breakfast. Expect the people to be gracious no matter what, because they just want to please you and please the tourists and make sure that you're having a great time. Most importantly, and Kim, you'll get a kick out of this, expect fancy toilets. I've never been to a place with so many fancy toilets before in my life.
Yeah, there are Japanese style toilets, these bidet style toilets everywhere. They're really, really cool. If you've never experienced one, it's really awesome. My top tip, as somebody who really likes to have milk with their coffee, I would say get a couple of little Tetra packs of soy milk or almond milk, so that you can have your cereal at breakfast or something like that, just in case they don't have soy milk at the breakfast place. Those would be my tips. All right. I want to thank the three of you so much for joining me today and talking to me so soon after the trip. I really wanted to do this whilst it was still so fresh in our minds and we're still so excited. Just quickly before we go, can you tell us your Instagram handles or your websites so that people can go sign up for your mailing list and learn out all about the cool things you're doing?
Sure, I'm at Vegan Tours NY, and my website is vegantoursny.com.
So my website is greenearthtravel.com. My Instagram is greenearthtravel, and then same thing with Facebook, Twitter, which I don't go on a lot, but it is vegan travel.
My website is vegjohnsonjourneys.com, and my Instagram and Facebook are at vegjohnsonjourneys.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope we'll have a catch up soon.
Thanks, Bridie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.